Um, to stand here and read a fairy tale is, or to write it, for heaven's sakes, is something that's pretty far akin to what I usually write. But let me give you a little background. Years ago, in the middle of my 21-year career as the aquatic director at Sierra Vista / Showdown / what is now High Point, I had a little girl. She started with me when she was 9. She was a tall girl. She's now a lawyer for the Marshall firm, graduate of the academy, who met here in the late 80s, a boy who walked on from Freedom High School in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania as a senior and became one of the most outstanding swimmers we've had here. A boy named Bob Anderson, mechanical engineer. And at some point in their relationship as teammates and teachers and coaches and then lifeguards and assistants, if you will, or whatever the club's name was at the time up there, I think she caught his eye. And eventually, I was the last to know. And eventually, they made plans to be married, and they asked me if I would write something for their wedding. And so I wrote a fairy tale called Once Upon a Time. And this is that fairy tale. Now, the water fairy in question is this tall, stately girl. We have a tall, stately girl on our swim team. Maybe I'll write one about you next year. And the interesting thing about the process, as far as the wedding was concerned, I had no idea this was going to happen, that at some point, when they arrived at the altar, at some point they knelt. And that's when I unexpectedly was supposed to come on and read the fairy tale. Meanwhile, they're down here on their knees, and I'm standing above them as some pontificator, you know, reading this fairy tale, which is an old story, but you know how fairy tales go. It subscribes to the mold. It may be a little different in that it is probably more lyrical. Let's hope so. And hopefully I can read it since I didn't make the type. Once upon a time. As it is with all fairy tales, this story begins in the classical way, once upon a time. For it was once upon a time, maybe only yesterday, maybe an eon of yesterdays ago, that there lived by the side of an emerald pool in a distant wood of sunshine and soft shadow, a tall and beautiful winged water fairy. The water fairy was uncommonly wise in the ways of children, and especially water children, and I might add, especially 8 and unders, the type she covers. For children of this wood and pool, childhood was full of joy and laughter and innocence, enhanced, of course, by the presence of the water fairy. She appeared magically each day at dawn, settling suddenly and majestically upon the water in one exquisite, quiet fold of wings that stained the woodland water the children swam in. She brought to them a symphony of watercolor, midnight blue and orange, gold and green, lilac, rose, and purple. Perhaps the children should have recognized then that her wings were elegaic, and that poems pulsed from the crush of color her coming cast upon their eyes. All that aside, it would be inadequate to say that her presence always took the children's breath away. Each and every moment, it seemed to them, was as endless as a summer day. But infinity, as Selena can tell you, takes a bit of getting used to. And even though the children told each other convincingly 100 times that she would be the water fairy of the woodland pool forever, deep inside the hollows of their golden hearts, they sensed she wouldn't, or couldn't be. And as summer days melted into longer nights, a sadness settled in the air that by and by they began to see their breath in. Sometimes when their tiny voices cried out about the end of things, she explained to them how it was with water fairies. They only last forever in the heart, she told them. But forever is difficult for children to perceive, and so her words fell on ears deafened by innocence and the fall of leaves. When the last leaf of autumn lay withered on the forest floor beneath the trees, and the water of the woodland pool turned from emerald green to winter gray, the water fairy fell into a deep and dreamy sleep. The children felt a roughness and then an aching in their hearts, and then they too fell mysteriously into a dream spelled by pain and a winter landscape as cold and colorless as a moon to rain. Now also in this land of children, of course, there lived a young and handsome prince, who being descended from some mystical water lineage, and having been stunned by the beauty of the water fairy, but being too shy by nature to advance his suit, he disguised himself as a frog and took up residency with other web-footed creatures beneath the ferns by the edge of the woodland pool. And at evening tide, or sometimes in that precise moment, embracing the ebb of night, fading away into the whisper of dawn's new light, he lay upon a lily pad and sang in a deep and resonant, almond-throated voice, love songs to the water fairy. And as he sang, he rolled his gold and glassy eyes and licked his love for the water fairy dry with a frog tongue that took catching things for granted. But, alas, the frog prince could not know that his voice was merely one of many nocturnal murmurings in the night. When the end of autumn came, and as time moved on in and out of day and night, and after the water fairy and the children had fallen asleep, the frog prince sang on, shivering beneath the frosty forest ferns and shards of early ice. Then winter came. The frog's tiny heart grew weaker. But finally, on a day when ice imprisoned trees and love songs echoed in the air as clear as shepherds' flutes, the frog's throaty voice rose magically above all the other voices in the pool. So at last the water fairy heard his song somewhere high above her dreamy sleep. She stirred, then woke, leaned down and touched the frog's glistening throat, and then caressed his tiny head. "I'll bet you're not a frog at all," she said. And then she bent and kissed his feverish lips. The frog trembled. His eyes turned fiery red. And then he stood and shed his frog skin and became the handsome prince again. Around the pool, the water children trembled in their sleep, then woke, rejoicing, when they saw the vision of the lovely couple of their dreams. Golden sunshine flooded winter from their eyes, and as they watched, transfixed, the frog prince gathered the water fairy to his breast, and they swam away together forever into an embroidery of emerald pool and silver mist. Like sonnets, endings to fairy tales should be penned in couplet line. So while some may think, here's the couplet, if there is no magic, one forever stays a frog would suffice. I prefer to think the simplicity of living happily ever after is rather nice. Thank you.